We all face unique safety issues no matter where we work. None of us are perfect. There's things that we are going to miss until an accident happens. But what I want to focus on is that when we are faced with those safety issues, what did we learn from them? How did we face that challenge? And what did we learn from them? So today, that's what we're going to dive into. This is part 2. So if you have not listened to the previous episode, I would suggest that you do that. These are 5 top safety issues that I have faced. Let's get into it. Hey there, safety friends. Welcome to the Safety Geek Podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Sargent, CSP and 27-year safety professional. After spending years training safety leaders across the globe for a large organization and creating safety programs from the ground up over and over again, I'm now sharing my processes and strategies with you. Hello, my safety friends. Thank you so much for coming back to another episode of the Safety Geek Podcast. Now, today is actually part 2. Last week, I had told you that during our weekly masterclass, somebody had posed a couple of questions to me. One was, what are the top 10 safety issues that I have faced or seen? And the other was, what was the worst case scenario? So I've answered a lot of those in the previous episode. If you have not listened to it yet, then I would start there. These are in no particular order, though. So, you could listen to this one first, and that would be perfectly fine. But my approach to this was not like putting them in any order or saying this issue is worse and just talking about horror stories. I really want to discuss how I approach these issues and how I learned from them so that way it didn't happen again in the future. Yeah, so that's what today's episode is about. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you to everybody who has reached out and gave me their condolences and shared their kind words. It really means a lot to me. It really does. So thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. All right, so let's get on to today's episode, which is going to be 5 of my top 10 that I kind of came up with. And quite honestly, I could probably go on and on. Like in the future, I might do another episode on this. But I was trying to come up with lessons learned as well as these issues that we typically all face in some way, shape, or form. And hopefully so that way you get something out of it. So it isn't just me indulging in my own horror stories. All right. So the first one I want to chat about is one that everybody faces. Everybody I know faces this one. It is blocked exits or blocked eyewash stations. And in my case, they would block it with product, right? Like they would put their storage product there and things like that. This is a constant struggle. And we as safety people, we understand the risk that they're putting themselves at. That like when an accident happens and you need to evacuate the building, this is really bad. And this is not as bad as the last episode where there were chains and locks on the doors, but it's still bad if people can't get to an exit or if they're tripping or falling during a fire to get to an exit, or they have a chemical in their eye and they can't get to the eyewash station. We understand that there's always the risk of this and that it's so important to keep exits free and eyewash stations free. And what I've always faced is like, people are just trying to get their job done and they need a place to put their supplies or their product, or they don't think it's a big deal that they're putting it here because nobody ever uses this exit. This eyewash station hasn't been used in years, right? So they don't see it as a problem. In fact, this one company, it was a new acquisition I walked into. I was doing my first inspection of it and they had their eyewash station blocked. And honestly, it wouldn't have mattered if it wasn't blocked because when I ran the water, it was a plumbed eyewash station. When I ran the water, it came out rusty. Like they had never even done their regular inspections on their eyewash station. So if somebody's eyes were flushed with that water, it would have been awful. But anyway, I digress. I see it as a huge issue, and that if you could just create zones where this is an absolute zero tolerance. We do not block these things. And you can create that culture where people have that same respect for these areas as we do. They would find another place to put this product. It's not like in front of the exit or the eyewash is the only place. It's the most convenient place because exits and eyewashes are designed to be convenient. So you have to kind of really drill that into them. But when we talk about changing beliefs and changing people's thinking, just telling them that is never going to be enough. We need them to experience what it would be like. So one way that I did this to get them to really open up their eyes to what they were doing. And my goal was actually to get the supervisors to realize it, because it wasn't just the problem that the employees were putting the products there. It was that the supervisors were doing nothing about it. So they saw it and they still weren't doing it. And their attitude was there was no other place to put it. And my attitude was if they had no other choice, they would have found some other place to put it. So what I did is I ran an evacuation drill, which I did these often anyway. But instead of just having all exits open, I blocked the main exits. And I made it like, this is where the fire is. You can't exit here. So it kind of forced people to use these exits that don't necessarily get used that often. So I blocked all of the regular exits. And this is actually a great idea to do in fire drills just because people get used to one exit and they don't think about where all the other exits are. So it's training that different muscle memory to use other exits. But when I did this, it truly opened up their eyes as to why these other exits are important. And that kind of helped the situation. Now, another thing that I did was I ran simulations about the need for using an eyewash. So when I would catch a supervisor or somebody opening up a new chemical or doing something like that, or if somebody was using a chemical nearby, I would go to that supervisor and I would bring the situation, what was going on to their attention. And I would go, okay, you're here working. They're working with this chemical. Something unexpected happened and it splashes in your eyes. What are you going to do? And I would make them think about it. Like, what are you going to do? You now have a chemical burning your eyes. What are you going to do? And that made them realize the importance of the eyewash station. It also made them realize the importance of the location of the eyewash station. Because we were in a refrigerated environment, the eyewash station was actually too far away for somebody who had chemicals in their eyes. And this opened up the need and the justification for us to put eyewash fixtures in the sinks that were in the room, that were just attached to plumbing right in the room. So we fixed the whole problem, but that's how I really brought it to their attention. So those are the two ways that I truly got them to change their internal thinking about it. Things I had tried before that, which kind of worked, and they generally work in some situations, but they take longer to work, is getting them to fix it themselves. Meaning that a lot of times when we walk through a facility or we're doing an inspection, we fix things ourselves. Like we see the eyewash station is blocked, we unblock it. Or maybe we grab an employee and we have them unblock it, right? But the true fix is grabbing the supervisor and getting the supervisor to fix it. Another way to fix this is to put something that they need on this path. Let's say that they have a tool that they're regularly using, and their tool storage is in one area. If you can move that tool storage to be within the path of the eyewash or the exit, not blocking it, but like on that path, then they are less likely to block that path because they know they have to go down that path to grab their tools or their tool storage. So that worked in one situation. It's a way of engineering it out, I guess you could say, because they wouldn't want to block their own stuff because they knew that was stuff they were using. The reason they were blocking the exits in the eyewash is because they were never using them. If it was something that got used regularly, they would never block it. But you still want to have it there for emergencies. So hopefully those will give you some ideas, because I know this is an issue everybody faces. And those are different ways that I would approach it to fix it in the future. All right, the next safety issue was CDL drivers that were on the road for 90 plus hours in a 7-day period. They were literally running dual logs. And obviously this was a new acquisition, which I think is so funny when corporations buy new companies. They do their due diligence financially, but they never do their due diligence on things like safety. They always have us come in after the fact and fix it, but they won't give the resources to fix it. And then they get mad at safety because it costs so much to fix everything. As well, if you'd brought us in the beginning and had us audit their safety before you bought it, then we could have given you some dollar figures on how to fix it. But anyway, this company was running dual logs. Their drivers were working like 90 hours a week. Yes, their drivers were complaining about this. They had very high driver turnover. Nobody had really reported them to DOT though. And management didn't see that there was a problem, because what was happening was the transportation manager was covering it all. So the upper management just saw that the job was getting done. And because of their pay structure, they weren't paid by the hour. Nobody saw the hours that they were actually working. And a lot of it ended up getting hidden. And I came in and I immediately was like, this company now has deeper pockets, because before you were a mom and pop and now you're owned by this large organization, you have very deep pockets. This cannot be tolerated. And luckily the management team agreed with me. They just didn't know that it was happening, because this transportation manager was hiding it all and basically telling people to run dual logs. Now, I did not tell them to fire anybody. I told them that we just needed to fix it. And in order to fix it, we had to identify the problem routes, and we needed to know how many drivers to hire, because obviously we had to hire more drivers. We started the hiring process, and at the same time, I forced the current drivers to be putting in accurate logs. Now, this was before electronic onboard recorders were mandated. So like now I don't think it's impossible, because I'm sure there's some drivers being tricky out there, but it's a lot harder. Like, I don't think you'd see this as much. But my whole point is, like, when there is a non-compliance issue like this, sometimes you have to get them to actually be doing it compliant, even if it shows huge liability and huge issues in being compliant, because they were running these dual logs and nobody could have seen that they were doing this unless they went deeper into it. So sometimes you have to shine light on the problem and open yourself up for that liability in order to fix it. And this was something that we easily were able to identify our problem routes, hire more drivers, get them trained. And within a short period of time, I believe we fixed this problem in 3 or 4 months, it was stopped. And we did not interrupt deliveries. That was the big thing, because they were making their deliveries and we didn't want to risk customer satisfaction. If we just all of a sudden stopped delivering and not making those deliveries, our customers would have been angry. We would have lost sales, right? So we did things to mitigate it in the meantime, hiring third parties, bringing in other companies until we could have enough people trained and everything fixed. But just keep that in mind, that when you have a non-compliance, like this is 100%, if OSHA or DOT or some regulatory body came in, they would shut us down for this. Sometimes you just got to shine light on it, create a plan to fix it, and start working that plan and mitigate it out as quick as possible, maybe using third parties for short periods of time. But we were really lucky that no accidents happened during our fix and that we were able to fix it quickly. I was also lucky that their current pay structure was like they were paid by the load and by the trip type thing. I can't remember. It was like that they were paid by the deliveries. So the drivers suffered because the drivers lost pay, but at the same time, they were no longer working 90 hours. They were working the 70 hours in 8 days as opposed to 90 hours in 70 days. But the company, it didn't cost them too much money because the pay structure stayed the same. Which quite honestly, I'll tell you an ABC type of pay structure. I can't remember what ABC, activity-based compensation, ABC, thank you. ABC pay structure, I think is awful when it comes to a safety standpoint. I don't think anybody should be using an ABC pay structure because it actually promotes people to take an unsafe action to get the job done quicker so that way they could make more money, which is probably why this was in place to begin with. It probably didn't start with a transportation manager. It probably started with a driver trying to get in more loads and just lying about their logs. All right, safety issue number 3 that I want to share is lack of fall protection or lack of lockout tagout or just poor forklift operations, like just poor compliance on highly hazardous items. And I've actually seen this multiple times. I have dealt with several deaths. A location within our company had a supervisor who trained people on fall protection, not use his fall protection, and monkey climb the warehouse racking, and then he fell to his death. This was when I was a regional. It was not my location, but these are the things that can happen. Had another driver that was driving unsafely. He was driving his forklift too fast and he hit something. And when he did, the controller because it was a stand-up forklift, so I had a little controller, went into his chest and killed him. And then obviously I've also seen where people didn't lock out and they've lost hands and fingers and limbs. So to me, these are high hazard things that we need to have a zero tolerance policy for, that you have to follow them no matter what. And the issue a lot of times is that the management team doesn't see it as hazardous as we do. They see it as, well, if they got injured doing it, it's their own fault. It's that whole attribution error where they're not looking at the situation, they're looking at the person, and they're blaming the person for climbing the racks. Well, if we had a zero tolerance policy, because I'll tell you right now, that was not the first time that supervisor climbed those racks, but it was allowed until he fell and died. And now all of a sudden it's not allowed. And that's what ends up happening, is that companies don't take action until the awful thing happens. And you have to change their thinking of, we don't want the awful thing happening. And changing it from being, going back to that attribution error, what happens is that when an accident happens, people blame the person over the situation. When if they were in that same situation, they would likely take the same actions. So you have to get them to realize, if you were in this situation, how would you handle it? And when you're getting pressured to get the job done. Hey there, quick break in this episode, but it's worth it, I promise. If you ever wish you had ready to go safety templates, checklists, spreadsheets, and tools so that you're not stuck creating everything from scratch, I got you covered, my safety friend. When you sign up for my all access resources, you get instant access to my private resource vault. Plus, you'll get my safety leadership newsletter, where a few times a week, I will send you an email packed with quick, actionable tips that you can use today. These are the same resources and strategies that I have used to build world-class safety programs, and now they're yours for free. So grab them up today. Go to thesafetygeek.com/resources to get your all-access pass. Alrighty, let's get back to the episode. So the way that I address these issues whenever I come in to an organization and I see that they have very high hazard compliance issues is I do assessments on safety, obviously. And an assessment in my world is where I don't have names. It's like doing an observation of a department with no names. So it's not observing a person, it's observing a department. A great example would be forklift operation. I would break that down into all the different pieces of forklift operation. And then I would assess how compliant they are with those pieces. And if there's 10 forklift operators, I'm assessing all 10. But on top of that, I would also compare it to other aspects of that department, because a lot of times people would want to blame the employee for getting injured when really it's how that department is being run. So I would also get data on the quality, the expenses, the theft, the damage, the efficiency of that department. And I would compare it to other departments that had a good safety record. And typically what you see is that when departments are failing in safety, they're also failing in other areas. So then it becomes easier for my executives to say, look, I'm seeing a lot of lack of enforcement of our high hazard safety issues. And how can I convince them that this is important, not just because an accident is going to happen? Because if you're relying on that moral issue, they need to be doing this because an accident may happen. There is always a piece of an executive's or manager's mind of, will it really happen? What's the likelihood of it happening? So instead, I try to look at the department as a whole and show that it's systemic and it's bleeding into other areas. They're not enforcing safety. They're also not enforcing quality. They're also not enforcing efficiency. They have bad employee morale that's leading to turnover, that's leading to theft, that's leading to poor quality. So I can show that this is just one indicator that is showing us a department as a whole. So we need to really ramp up something in this whole department. And I mean, I say like safety can be this indicator for all other areas, but really you can take any of those areas. If a department has poor quality, then they likely have poor safety as well. If they have high theft or high damage, then they likely have poor quality and poor safety as well. Alrighty, so the next one was kind of scary. I will be honest with you. This one took me by surprise, and I really blame myself for it. And that was a CO2 leak in our production room that caused us to evacuate and stop production for the rest of the day. Luckily, it was caught in time that nobody got sick and we didn't have to send anybody to the hospital. So what happened? Give you the background, is there was this production room always had this one piece of machinery and they replaced it. It was an older piece of machinery. So they replaced it with this new version. This new version pumped CO2 into the product. And as they were installing it, this was one of those things where they did not include me in the pre-planning. And they had it installed and they told me what this thing did. And I even said to them, I was like, does it have an oxygen sensor? If you're pumping CO2, we have to make sure the CO2 is not leaking, that we have an oxygen sensor. And they pointed to this box on the wall and they said, yes, that's our oxygen sensor. And I trusted them on that. And quite honestly, I was very busy at the time. You know how our jobs are. And I trusted that they had it in place. I did not test it. So my fault on that. So that machine had been in place for a couple of months and it had been going pretty strong. And then one day I was in the break room, an employee came out of the production room and they said how nauseous they were. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, and I mean, that's the thing about working in colder environments too, is we get a lot of illness too. It's like, I think it's just the cold or the change of temperature all the time. Like every flu season, we always had to deal with that. And everybody was in close quarters. So we were always on the lookout for people being sick because we didn't want it to spread to everybody else. So we were assisting that person. And shortly after, another person came out. So I have a really bad headache. I'm feeling a little nauseous. And I was like, that's weird. And they were both from the same area. So your first thinking is that maybe there's a flu or an illness that's being spread in that department. But then a third person came out who was not from that department. And I was like, wait a minute. This is too close together. This was like within a very short period of time. We're not talking days. We're talking like within an hour. And I was like, something weird's going on. So we did an inspection of the room. And obviously CO2 is odorless. You couldn't tell what was going on. We looked, we couldn't figure it out. And we did not have a handheld oxygen sensor. So finally, I was like, I pushed the maintenance team. I said, I'm sorry, something is wrong. And honestly, the CO2 did not even come to mind at the time. We called like an all hands on from the maintenance team, from the supervisors. And I was like, this is just too unusual. Can you guys just do an inspection of the equipment? Make sure, is anybody using a new chemical? Like, we knew that it had to be something more than just a virus. And one of the maintenance people brought up the CO2 going into this one machine, and they went up into the ceiling. And that is where they found the CO2 leak. And then obviously, so it had been leaking up into the ceiling, and then it went down into the production room. So I would say my lesson learned on this was not just checking that what they told me was true, because this actually happened twice. Like, I had some arc flash issues where I wanted everybody to go through arc flash training and wear fire resistant clothing. And they were like, no, we never open up the electrical panels. And I came in on a weekend and the electrical panels are wide open and maintenance is doing things that they told me that they would never do. 2 lessons there is just not really believing what people tell you and just double checking that what you're told is true. And then making sure that you have ways on hand to test what they're telling you. Because I've also had maintenance people like tell me the machine is doing one thing when it wasn't, when I actually looked at the instruction manual myself, because they're trying to get around safety. You see this a lot, especially when companies don't have safety programs to begin with, and they're just seeing safety as a burden or something extra instead of, hey, that's here so that way we run more efficiently. Like literally the CO2 leak shut us down for a day, where if they had just had the equipment in place, they would have found it. They wouldn't have had to shut down. They could have fixed it while they were still working. But there was so much CO2 leak that it shut us down for an entire day. So that's my lesson learned on that one. It's a sad one. I think that it's one of those stories that in my mind I see where I failed, because it was a hazard I recognized, but it was one I didn't mitigate well enough. All right. So my last one that I want to share with you goes back to that muscle memory type of incident that I shared in the last episode, but more so. Like a lot of times we put controls in place and things are readily available to people and they still don't use them. So what happened was we had a maintenance worker on our roof and we had an ammonia refrigeration system, and he was on the roof working on the ammonia refrigeration system. This maintenance worker was actually a supervisor. He was trained. We had Eyewash stations readily available. He was well aware of everything. And he was working on the ammonia refrigeration on the roof. I can't remember how it happened, but there was a leak and he got sprayed in the face with ammonia. And he went on to finish his work and stop the leak before taking care of himself. And yes, when he went inside, he went to the Eyewash station, he washed it and flushed his eyes out. But by that time, it was too late. Because even though he felt like, yes, I know I'm injured, he didn't realize the extent of his injuries. And luckily, his lungs were not too badly damaged. He did have permanent damage to his lungs, but worse, he went blind. He is completely blind now from this incident. And my lesson learned on that is really expressing the same thing that firefighters do. I know a lot of safety people have been in the fire service, so I'm probably preaching to the choir to a lot of people here. But the way that firefighters approach a scene is that they're always valuing human life over the building, over the equipment, right? Like they're going to rescue the people who are alive first, and then they're going to determine, is it worth the risk to send our people in to put the fire out to save the building? So if they can go into the building and put the fire out without putting their people's lives at risk, then they'll do it. If not, they'll stay on the outside and then they'll just stop it from spreading to other buildings. So our maintenance worker put the building over his own life. His immediate response should have been to stop and go to the eyewash station. But because he delayed getting to the eyewash station, he ended up blind. So the way that we fix this in the future was, yes, expressing, life over building, but then we also made them carry eyewash bottles in their toolbox. So we had several eyewash stations. They were within use, and it never made any sense to have them put a bottle in their toolbox too. Like it's just taking up space. Because I could just go over there. It's 25 feet away. So it just didn't make sense to make them do that. But I honestly think that if he could have very quickly sprayed his eyes with something, and then he might have at least cleaned his eyes out. And because I can't stop somebody from putting building over their own life. I don't know how to change that motivation other than to drill it into them that their life is not worth the building. So the thing that I really think companies need to do and corporations need to do is punishing any acts that put people's lives at risk. If we punish the acts that people do that are putting their lives at risk, then they are less likely to put their lives at risk. But what I see corporations do is celebrate it. That when somebody puts the company over their own life or puts the company first, they celebrate it. Like I worked for this organization. There was a couple of years ago where there was this snowstorm up in the northern US that was so bad, people were dying in their vehicles. Like it was so cold and the snowstorm so bad. If you went out to go to the store, you got stuck in this whiteout. You might have died in a snowdrift. And there were stories of people being dug out and things like that. It was awful. And it was not just in one area, it was in multiple areas. So one of our drivers was sent out into the snowstorm to make deliveries because they're delivering food products, which are considered important in emergencies. Yes. So he went out into this weather that was reportedly so bad that even emergency vehicles were not going out to make deliveries, and he got stuck and he ended up sleeping in his truck. So the company celebrated his dedication to get the groceries out, is the way that they like to put it at this company. And we employees, not just safety, like employees across the board were like, you should be punishing the person that put his life at risk. Like, why was he out there in the first place? And then they celebrated this at like a town hall that got televised through the whole organization. And I was so happy to see the comments against it. There were also comments of people being like, good job, so great, And what got me upset too was that you should be angry at yourself. If you put your employee in that type of situation, you should be angry at yourself. I think that if we punish acts or people putting their lives at risk, that people will stop putting their lives at risk over the product, over production, over the building. And I've seen people put their lives at risk many times. The story earlier of climbing the racking, I've seen people stand on uneasy things just to change a light bulb, basically. Like that's them putting their lives at risk, and that's what needs to be punished, whether the accident happens or not. And then you tend to get people to stop putting their lives at risk. And you also get better morale because then your employees know that the company cares about them more than the widgets, more than the groceries. So that concludes like my top 10 in answering, I think his name was Alex, answering Alex's question about the top 10 that I have, safety issues that I have experienced. I hope that over these 2 episodes, you've gotten a lot out of it. I would love to hear your comments. And if you have anything that you want me to talk about on the podcast, be sure to reach out to us. Just email support@thesafetygeek.com, because I would love to hear your ideas and I would love to just kind of riff on different safety issues out there. Alrighty, my safety friend, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now. Hey, if you're just getting started in safety, or you've been at this for a while and are hitting a roadblock, then I want to invite you to check out Safety Management Academy. This is my in-depth online course that not only teaches you the processes and strategies of an effective safety management program, but how to entwine management support and employee participation throughout your processes. Are you ready to finally understand exactly what you should be doing and ditch that safety police hat forever? Then you have got to join me and your fellow safety scholars over at Safety Management Academy. Just go to thesafetygeek.com/SMA to learn more and to get started. That's thesafetygeek.com/SMA. And I will see you in our next students only live session. Bye for now.